Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We are very excited to get started. I will just start with a brief introduction and do some agenda setting before we introduce our speakers for this afternoon. Welcome to the third session of our Racial Equity and Advancing Cultural Humility Learning Community. The focus of our talk today is engaging in crucial equity conversations, and we'll be joined by two guest speakers, the first being Dr. Dietra Hawkins with Both and Partners Incorporated, which specializes in equity by design. And we'll also be led in conversation by Maria Restrepo-Toro with Yale's Program for Recovery, and Community Health. And she also serves as the co-director for the New England Mental Health Technology Transfer Center. My name is Janan Wyatt. I am also with the Yale School of Medicine, Department of Psychiatry and Program for Recovery and Community Health. All right, so housekeeping in terms of our time today. We will have microphones muted during today's session at designated times, such as the Q&A or during breakout rooms. You can either raise your hand or unmute yourself to speak and engage in conversation. When speaking, we just ask that you eliminate background noise as much as possible. We also invite you to submit questions through the chat or comments through the chat. We are pleased to offer the option of closed captioning for this webinar. You can select that option and change transcription settings by clicking the CC Live transcript button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Also, registration affirms that your consent to receive an evaluation follow-up link after today's session via email. You're also consenting to the recording of this session. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties throughout our session today, please send myself or Vanessa a private chat. Our disclaimer is recognizing that our funding comes from SAMHSA, and the views and the opinions expressed today are of those of the presenters, the moderators, and the facilitators, and not SAMHSA. The Mental Health Technology Transfer Center Network uses person-centered language, affirming, respectful, and recovery-oriented language in all of our activities. During today's session, we want to ensure that you are contributing to our discussion via the chat or the Q&A section of our seminar this afternoon, and we also just encourage you to use language that is affirming, respectful, and strength-based. So for our agenda today, I will welcome our guest speakers. You'll also have a chance to talk with us during breakout sessions, as well as answer questions through Q&A. And then we'll wrap up our session this afternoon with offering some space to process some of the information you learned today, as well as ask questions to our guest speakers. All right, so to get started, we want to be as interactive as possible. We're gonna launch some polls that we want you to answer. So Vanessa, if you could launch our first poll, that would be great. All right, so the first question that we're asking audience members is to think about where you are on your race equity journey. And there are a series of responses. You can choose one to describe where you might be in your journey. I see some responses coming in. This is great. Again, we just want a way to engage with you all and have some interaction with our audience members. Okie dokie. So oh, some more numbers are coming in. I'll be patient. All righty. So for many of you, you've identified relatively competent and recognizing that you're learning while you practice in regards to your equity journey. So that's great. And then also a great deal of you are ready and willing to learn. And so we are excited to do that with you. And we hope that we offer some information and resources to start that journey during today's session. Our next poll question that we want to ask, Vanessa will launch that momentarily. Awesome. Can you explain code switching? A simple yes or no response. Let us know what you know about that. Okay, so it's looking like the majority of audience members are saying no, they cannot. So this is really helpful information to our speakers, as well as facilitators this afternoon. Okay. So most of you said that you are not familiar with code switching, and so perhaps that can be a point that we can discuss later. Again, great information for our co-speakers. The third poll question we're going to launch now. Have you participated in a protest? Also a yes, no answer. Very great. right, the group looks pretty split on this. So the majority of folks saying yes, which is great. Next poll question. All right, so here's a series of stacked questions that we want to know. The first, I'm comfortable talking about race and racism. There's 3 response choices there. The second question, I can explain critical race theory. Also, 3 response choices, yes, no, or somewhat. And the third question, I can define white privilege. And the response choices are yes, no, or maybe. Lots of votes coming in, so this is great to see. Thank you all for participating in our polls. All right, so let's see, the majority of you said yes, you are comfortable talking about race, racism, and for those who are somewhat comfortable, we just invite you to join in this conversation and perhaps recognize where discomfort starts to bubble up. Also, let's see, a nice split, again, in regards to critical race theory. Some people can explain it, some people cannot, and some people are somewhat, I can explain that. And then the third question, the majority of you can define white privilege. And for those who are in the no or maybe sections, perhaps the information that you get from our speakers today will help boost your confidence in understanding of that concept as well as explaining that. So that's great, thank you. All right, I think those are the end of our poll questions. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to our speakers. Again, we have Dr. Dietra Hawkins, as well as Maria Restrepo-Toro leading our conversation, and I will leave it up to them to introduce themselves. And I am happy to be in the background and facilitate, as well as help out in the chat and answer questions. So welcome, thank you for joining, and we will get started.
Thank you, Jana. This was absolutely amazing. My name is Maria Restrepo-Toro, and I am honored to be sharing this space with you all and with Dr. Hawkins. In behalf of the New England Mental Health TTC, we welcome you. If this is your first time with our series, we welcome you. We welcome you for the first time, but if you've been around with us for the last few ones, welcome back again. Today we are honored and we're going to be having a conversation. So we really invite you all to be open to learning, have a space where we would love to see you on screen to share. It's going to be an interactive for all of us, because I don't know, for me, this is a journey that I enjoy every single day. So I'm going to have Dr. Dietra. You're going to learn more a little bit about me in just a moment, but just turn it over to my colleague and friend Dietra, just to say hi.
Thank you. Thank you. I am super excited to be here with you all. I want to just let you know that it's very exciting to be double booked at this moment, and exciting to still be here with you today, and to already see in the poll that there's a lot of you who are comfortable with this conversation, which is part of what our goal for today is going to be, is to create some opportunities for you to share and talk with each other. And then to have some additional conversation next week as we continue this process. So I want to make sure I'm saying that with you, that, you know, we see this as an ongoing conversation. We know that you've had previous sessions, but also just for this, that the goal really will be that ongoing process. So I don't know if we're, yes, thank you. It's like, I think we're getting ready to have our first breakout, which just let me say a couple things about me. I live in Atlanta. I have a Connecticut number. I've spent a lot of time in Connecticut and still connected to the Yale Program for Recovery and Community Health. Yeah, you can see my slide there. And while I certainly have experiences to share, and being a collaborator, helping people have these conversations to be brave, my hope is always that we create a space for you to take a risk and to start sharing stories that really make a difference to who you are and can connect with each other. So we will be prioritizing actually this session more on you having some opportunities to talk to each other more than hearing necessarily from us. But we do want you to be thinking about what are some of those burning questions things that you are finding that you'd like some support around, so we can be designing that moving forward. So I'm going to turn it back over to Maria, and then invite you all to your first breakout session.
Thank you, Dr. Hawkins. So this is great. So we are going to be, again, I will share a little bit more about me when we come back. For now, so we're going to go into 3 breakout sessions. You will have 3 facilitators. We have Ingrid Paget, Jenan, that you already met, and myself, and then Dr. Dietra is going to come to visit us. It's going to be only a 5 minutes, and we want to know what brought you here and well on the process, and that is really encourage you to have an opportunity, as Dr. Dietra says, to really have the conversation. So we'll be back in 5 minutes. Be sure that the time always ends before we say the last word. So Vanessa will tell us when it's kind of wrapping up, but of time always, but somehow we did it. Our group was fabulous. So I think it's so important as we do embrace these conversations to get to know who we have on the room, as much as we know we're going to be learning a few concepts, but so I think who are we? I think Dr. Dietra said, and I want to share how I got to my journey. This is my full name. It's pronounced Maria Elvira. Which is interesting because I don't get to use my middle name that often since I immigrated to America. I'm a proud Paisa, which is from Colombia, and the picture illustrates really what is on my heart. Colombia, Paisa is an area that's a state, and we are very much like how can we say, like, we are hands-on to go and to do things like that. But I've been in the States for a long time, in Boston always. So I definitely see myself in my lived experience as an immigrant and bicultural really having a huge impact in why I do this kind of work. At the same time, I'm a wife, a mom, a dog lover, older sister, lots of responsibilities with extensive family, which is extremely important for me. Cancer survivor, so I definitely have a lot of insight in what it means to transform one's life. And that's what I think I dedicated my life to recovery. I'm also a leader, educator, and I was a nurse. So I bring all of these pieces to myself. And when we come into these conversations, this is exactly what happened. We can come up with the titles, the MSs and all the stuff and the PhD for some of you, but it's really about the heart. It's really about encouraging the conversation from the beginning. I think we heard from this. So I think in terms of objectives, we kind of all talk a little bit about that. And I think this is what I heard in my room. Some people are really developing practice skills in how we engage in these conversations. And that's what we're going to be practicing today. Some of you are definitely looking for intellectual information. That's why we have this community, because it's an ongoing process. And all of the resources and the concepts are going to be discussed. We'll continue talking in the diversity talk. And next session, you're going to have even more information in terms of theory and intellectual. But we understand that merging those is extremely important. So we hope that this conversation is going to inspire you to be curious and to really, as Dr. Dietra said, have a space to really, really be able to feel we don't know each other clearly. I'm not expecting anybody to feel totally confident, but this is definitely a very space and state that we have all the good intentions. As we do this process, it's so important to have awareness and be aware of our own biases. I certainly had to do that as an immigrant, having to incorporate my values into the dominant culture. So we really, and I think we learned from Dr. Isom about the importance of equity mindset and equity prescription. So this is really what this is about. So, and again, as we do, of course, any conversation, you're going to hear us, we use always I statements. We ask, we are inquiring, we're not demanding. It's about feeling our discomfort and stretching that what we hear is about sharing our stories. That's why we ask you to come and share why you're here today, because I'm sure we all do, you also have your own gifts. It's about practicing self-care, and this is not about fixing anybody, which has been a huge growth area for me, because culturally that's kind of what I'm used to do. So sitting and with discomfort is a very important part of this process. Because this is a conversation, we're going to get a little bit into the theory here for a moment, and I'm going to ask my colleague Ingrid to help me with this as well. So there are some important tenets for crucial conversations. You know, we do know that they exist in a very social, emotional, cultural context in this case, as we know, we're Zooming, which allow us to have people from Texas and all these other places. So in some ways, is something we've been able to do through this. It's about a journey. We talk about that. There is not one time, and some of you, what I heard in my group, have these roles specifically to act on cultural diversity. Others are just trying to see how they can make a change. Again, becoming aware, and that we know this work is messy. And I think for me, that's what has been really the most important issue of this tenet. If I were to see is, I need to get myself that this is not all about intellectual and training concepts. I know I want to learn, and I do that many ways, by reading, by talking to people. But for me, understand that this is not a skill based and that I'm going to come to a workshop and do it all has been my major way of learning about this. But Ingrid, tell us if you want to share who you are. She's our colleague that does the work. So the floor is yours.
Sure, I am a communications and program strategist, and so by trade, I kind of use wordsmithing as my role in this world, really. And I've been doing that since as a child, and I continue to do it as an adult. I really want us to not think about like how-to and cookbook approaches, because that actually works to promote stereotyping, right? And I understand that stereotyping is a natural part of what we as people do, but I also feel that we all have a role to play. And so one of my goals is to really be curious, to be brave, but also to be vulnerable, and to really remember that we're all better together. And that's something that I want to be a part of. And no one is here to blame or take personal responsibility for institutional bias. So thanks, Maria. How about you, Dietra? Would you like to add any thoughts to this conversation around the tenets?
I want to just thank you both. I want to highlight that you've both come through training of facilitators with me. You did a beautiful job with this. This is these basic tenets, just to say this to everybody. I think in our profession, in our helping profession, we often are not practicing transparency. And so our goal is to model transparency, to be able to share with you how we think about things, and what our goals are here, so that we are giving people more information up front instead of assuming that they're just going to assimilate in with the way we're doing things. But by putting these things out there, we create an opportunity to share and make it transparent, and then give them the ability to choose to, keep moving forward.
Thank you.
Yes.
So I think I'm now going to turn it over to you just to talk a little bit about dialogue versus debate, and perhaps answer some, as we saw the initial poll, where things are incorporated. This is going to be, and then we'll address some of the kind of theory concepts. So please, you have the floor.
So I like to share with people that when I first started doing this work, I, especially in working in the recovery community, I did a lot of listening sessions out in the community, and worked with people who were in early recovery. And they would say to me, Dr. Hawkins, I know you're a psychologist and you've been trained to listen, but I really need you to believe me too. And so that has also been true as we think about communities that have been traumatized, that are experiencing what I would call persistent racial trauma, that are strategies that we often use. So in our media, in the everyday media language, there's this sort of rhetoric of, we need to have a debate, and why are we so divided? And we need to bring everybody together. So what I want us to do is actually know what the differences are between what dialogue is and what debate is. And I'll say, as a healing professional, and especially as a psychologist, sometimes when we are just listening, we're just doing dialogue, people think that's therapy, which it's not right? And yet this is a skill that all of us can practice. So I think we needed at least 2 volunteers to start off with. So if we can get 2 volunteers to help us here, and maybe someone can let me know who's volunteered. What you're going to do is read 2 slides. I need one person who's going to read dialogue and another person who's going to read debate. And you're going to go back and forth. And there's 2 slides to read here. Okay, I see Tracy said something.
And Elizabeth
Did someone
Myers
else?
as well? Elizabeth
Okay.
Myers? Okay.
Elizabeth. Okay. So Tracy, do you want to take dialogue? And Elizabeth, did I get that right? Is going to take debate?
Sure. Is collaborative 2 or more sides work together toward common understanding?
Debate is oppositional. 2 sides oppose each other and attempt to prove each other wrong.
Dialogue, finding common ground is the goal.
Debate, winning is the goal.
Dialogue, one listens to the other side or sides in order to understand, find meaning and agreement.
Debate, one listens to the other side in order to find flaws and to counter its arguments.
Dialogue enlarges and possibly changes a participant's point of view.
Debate affirms a participant's own point of view.
Dialogue reveals assumptions for re-evaluation.
Debate defends assumptions as truth.
Dialogue causes introspection on one's own position.
Debate causes critique of the other position.
Dialogue opens the possibility of reaching a better solution than any of the original solutions.
Debate defends one's own positions as the best solution and excludes other solutions.
Dialogue creates an open-minded attitude, an openness to being wrong, and an openness to change.
Debate creates a closed-minded attitude, a determination to be right.
Dialogue, one submits one's best thinking, knowing that the other people's reflections will help improve it rather than destroy it.
Debate, one submits one's best thinking and defends it against challenge to show that it is right.
Thank you both. You know, as you were both reading that, I just wonder what came up for you in reading those pieces, what's sitting with you and hearing that back and forth.
Well, for me, what I realized is that I debate a lot. I debate often, and one of my worst character defects is the need to be right. And I am so attached to that need to be right. It's such a defense. It's a way I defend myself from getting closer to others, I think, and myself. So
yeah,
I appreciate it, that awareness very much. Thank you.
I appreciate your vulnerability because you are not alone, right? I mean, this is, we have debate teams. This is what we espouse in our country. You know, that is where we are. And yet we're trying to move in this direction of dialogue. Tracy, what about you?
I feel like I'm pretty open. I like to believe that I'm really open-minded. I get defensive in the sense of I'm very open and believe that all of us should be treated equally. I grew up in a military family, so you know, we moved around a lot, and I was exposed to different cultures and different diversities throughout our moving. I have some really, my best friend is white and is married to an African-American, and I always want to listen to her husband's stories and her children's stories of the experiences that they're living. And I want to be able to be that, and being working that in the schools, I want to be an openness to be able to provide that change, to have everyone's thinking be differently. Growing up in Washington State, we're a little bit more liberal, and being that I came from Virginia area and taking my son back for the very first time in the Carolina area, and not thinking to give him, you know, some background information on that. He grew up in a we talk about race, we talk about those kind of things. We are very open to the change. And then taking him back into that area where they're still really racist back there. And I felt horrible as a parent, not giving, you know, preparing him for some of those conversations that he might run into in the South. And so I want to be able to create that change and openness to bring a change to our world. So
thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you both being vulnerable and kind of being on the spot here. When I usually follow this slide by asking who here is good at debate. That might be the next slide. I'm not sure. But as you were both talking, actually, we'll go to the next slide. We are talking about the role of racism and what the pervasiveness of racism. So can I get one more person to read this slide for me? Or whoever.
Sarah B was our next volunteer.
Oh, Sarah, okay.
Sure, read this slide. What is racism? Racism is a system of structuring opportunity and assigning value based on the social interpretation of how one looks that unfairly disadvantages some individuals and communities, unfairly advantages other individuals and communities, and saps the strength of the whole society through the waste of human resources, by Dr. Cameron Jones.
Thank you so much. Dr. Jones has been a pioneer, you can go to the next slide, of really helping to establish in our public health arena, racism as a public health crisis. So there's close to 80 some cities now that have actually made that declaration and recognized that racism is a public health crisis. She gives us 4 principles for being anti-racist, and I think they very much align with what we've just been hearing from everyone. Tracy, your testimony of what, you know, the work and where we have to stretch, to Elizabeth, what you were sharing, that to start off with, racism is real. And that when we're denying of racism, you know, being racist, that in itself is part of the, you know, experience of racism, that systemic piece. That racism is about a system with power and control at the roots. That it really saps and impacts all of us, that racism impacts all, you know, especially in our behavioral health system. Imagine how we have made it okay that children who need help should be arrested or commit a crime before they can actually get help. This is what I was told when I was very first working with a young Black boy, that, you know, he was on the list, but to move him up to the top of the list, he would need to, you know, commit a crime, and then we could get him into treatment right away. And that we can act to dismantle racism. I like to add, not only can we act to dismantle, but we can heal. And that one of the things that gives me a lot of hope around that is my work in recovery. That we know that addiction, mental health doesn't discriminate, but often our healthcare systems do, right? And so there are things that we can do to both dismantle and heal. Can we go to the next slide? We ready for the next? Yeah. Can I get someone to read this one?
I will.
Thank you.
What is racial equity? The constant and systematic fair, just, and impartial treatment of all individuals, including individuals who belong to understand communities that have been denied such treatment, such as Black, Latino, and Indigenous and Native American persons, Asian Americans, and Pacific Islanders, and other persons of color.
Yeah, thank you. So this is continued work from Dr. Kamara Jones that is trying to help us to name, that there have been communities that have been underserved, that have been marginalized, that we're not just talking about minority, right, but actually talking about the experience of being marginalized and not having resources fairly and impartially, given to us. So as we begin today's conversation, we want to have 2 more or 3 more really 2 big breakout conversations. Am I right?
Yeah, I think we have time to have this conversation of the concepts, and then we go to the questions.
Yes, and I think they'll be kind of related, right? So the questions that we're looking to invite you into is based on those anti-racist principles. What do you see as a stretch goal for yourself? We've kind of introduced dialogue and debate. We've talked about what it means to be anti-racist and working toward racial equity. So, many of you are comfortable talking about these concepts. So what would you say is a stretch goal? And this is building on sort of growth mindset work. We want to give you an opportunity for that conversation, and then you'll have one more conversation that will bring you back in on, and how with your agency, your organization, can you support the healing and dismantling of racism? Some of you are probably already doing things, and this is an opportunity to share what some of those things are. So we want to use this time to have these conversations. And then we will definitely be sharing slides and information when we come back next week, so we can go even further into this of what does it really look like? And what are some of the examples based on your lived experience?
Okay, thank you so much. So I think we have definitely a time for like at least a 20-minute breakout sessions. Do you think we'll have time to do 4 then this time, so everybody gets a turn? And you being in one of the rooms, and that will that work? Or could you just do 3 and you kind of float around as we did before?
I probably need to, float.
Yeah.
If I need to.
Okay, so let's do 3 rooms. You can visit all of us. So let's do 20 minutes. Vanessa, thank you so much. And you can mix up again if you want. So we'll be back after 20 minutes to kind of reconvene, debrief. You can have one person in your group, select one person to bring up reporting back to the larger group. Okay, that was abrupt. I definitely was in the middle of a sentence talking about self-care. So what about other people? Also in the middle of the sentence? Okay.
I was not in the middle of a sentence, but I was also talking about self-care, Maria. So
okay, good. Well, so I guess I want to invite our facilitators here. Our group did not have the time to finish everybody. Time goes, we still have a few minutes, but I just want to see and check in where we are, or maybe just to open it up again into the larger room, and perhaps people can report teams or whoever want to do. So let's maybe hear from Janan's group and others and see where we are with this conversation.
Sure. Does anyone from the group that I was facilitating want to jump in and offer some highlight moments or points that were brought up? Well, I'll start us off, and if people want to kind of join in, please feel free to do so. So like I was saying, when we kind of all came back together, one of the things that we ended on in terms of a conversation point was burnout, as well as folks who have minoritized identities being a part of organizations and feeling responsible or being tagged to kind of do the work for the group or speak for a group of people, and how often that is tiring or frustrating. I'll speak for myself there. And how do we kind of navigate those spaces? How do we practice self-care? How do we practice community care so that we're not continuously burnt out, and then we can sustain the equity work that we are trying to do? There was also some conversation about groups or people within their organizations kind of starting equity-based conversations, and either they have gone successfully or they have dissolved and dismantled. And so why that is for both, like what are some facilitating factors as well as what are some barriers for continuing these courageous conversations within our organizations that can oftentimes be either triggering or difficult for people, and without skills or techniques to engage in courageous conversations, sometimes our barriers can prevent us from moving forward at all if we are feeling silence or if the group dissolves.
Thank you, Jenna. And others from the group would like to add anything? I will share some similarities too, but what about anybody from the group?
I just have one thing to say. I mentioned in our group with Janan that for me and my organization, it's education. It's courses or trainings like this. I've had many, and it's opened my eyes to the disparities that I had no idea about. And it, as far as healthcare, mental health care, we see it in the news, we see it all the time, but educating people is one of the ways to get rid of these barriers to the marginalized people that we work with. And even in your own organization, if you work with somebody, but I'm thinking more about clients in my case, but they require education. There's a big star next to, you must do this, 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 and this. And I have learned invaluable information. And without it, I don't think I could do what I do.
Well, thank you for that. But that was a fire alarm. So somebody with that, so I don't know what that was. Thank you so much. Ingrid, some kind of highlights from.
Yeah, we had a great conversation in our group, and Jace is kind of our report out master today. So thank you.
Of course. So our group talked about a lot of different things that we had for our stretch goals. We kind of spent a lot of time on that because we had such good goals. But one of them was identifying some of the communities that are being underserved in our own community, and then taking more risks and being willing to like have those hard conversations and being willing to really put yourself out there into those communities. I know for me, especially, I come from New Hampshire, and our communities of color are far fewer than the white population. And so sometimes it becomes easy to direct services at the people that are directly around us, but we need to start being better about bringing our services to other communities and not just expecting them to come to us, because it can be especially intimidating sometimes. So also another big one that I hadn't even thought of that really stuck with me was being able to show up and stay consistent with services that you're providing. Yes, it's nice to create new services for people, but if it's not going to be something that's sustainable, and then it's something that just gets taken away after a few years, it can leave some people kind of high and dry and feeling more like they're struggling more in the end because they don't know where to go next. And another thing we talked about was frustration and patience, and how we can get frustrated at the barriers that stigma and stereotypes cause, and that we recognize that we need to have patience, but at the same time, it can be so difficult to have that patience when you know that the stereotypes are harming people. And yeah, off of that, we talked about learning, trying to find new ways to reduce those barriers so that we don't have to deal with that frustration as much, at least, so that we are able to be more patient with those people that we do serve. And please, from anyone in my group, add anything that you want to that. I tried to write as fast as I could.
Oh, great job. Thank you.
Jace, that was great. Thank you. And I am so, it's interesting. I had a conversation with New Hampshire today, which I would love to connect with you and follow up to actually do this kind of work up there. So, well, I think if that's anybody from my group would like to summarize, or I definitely took some notes, but wanted to know if anybody would like to go first. And, you know, I know it's hard to have this conversation, and that's what we invite people to. It feels uncomfortable and weird, so it's very understandably so. So anybody from our group would like to say? Miraj, and I love if you kind of say what you said in our small group. That was really powerful. Not to me, you put on the spot, but you're my colleague.
Which is so basically, I think what I was saying is, you know, I do this work full time. It's my area, you know, bias, institutional bias, etc. Research, I mean, constantly engaged in it. But just listening to some of the people today for the last, you know, hour, I've just felt a lot of heart grow. And what I mean is that, you know, in the last 2 years, we've been extremely isolated. And what unfortunately what has occurred is your mind has also become a bit isolated in terms of interacting with others, and you tend to be rolling in small circles, and you know. But what this session today has really helped with is just help me see just so many people are just out there doing the work, trying their best, acknowledging limitations, just trying, and that's something. You know, because we roll in certain circles and we're just doing certain work that we're always doing, we don't get that as much as we used to. The person you meet at the train station and you just randomly strike up a conversation with, the person at the amusement park or the zoo, whatever it is, we're just not getting that enough. And so that was my comment, which was, I was just heartened by just, you know, hearing from people and feeling just less alone in this, feeling kind of bolstered a bit in that this work is important, and that people from very different regions or groups or backgrounds are trying their best. And it's very heartening when all you hear is the negativity coming from the news and from politicians and lies and things being spread. This has just felt very different. So that was my comment.
Thank you, Miraj. I think in terms of themes that we heard, so I think as he just pointed out, definitely for sure, the themes of isolation, and I think that's something your group did, Janan, too, which is expected to do the work because you are a person of color, and how exhausting that is and how lonely that is. This applies to other differences as well, right? To many other differences that we know, the intersectionality difference that exists. You know, we had a lot of representation from rural communities, a lot of states, and I really like what one of the members, Matt, mentioned about the book of anti-racist, that it in some ways it was like a recipe to do, and it's coming kind of remind me of those times that I started this journey when I was doing cultural competence training. That's kind of what we always go with to do these conversations with the cultural humility concept, right? As you heard, is learning is about openness, is an ongoing process, because at that time we used to do training like a recipe. So if you are from this background, you do this, you don't shake hands, and so it's interesting that at the group, because we did talk a little bit about anti-racist principles from Dr. Jones today, but there is the book which I also read. So I think it's a lot of people in our group really want to have tools to kind of promote this conversation. So we will are taking all into account, so we can provide, as we move forward with hopefully with all of you in this journey, we'll provide some practical ways of having these conversations, these courageous conversations. So but please, any of the group, we love to see people's get to know people's faces. It's being hard not to see everybody on screen. I know some people don't have screens, but if you feel comfortable, it will be great.
I just wanted to offer the moment to ask questions or process the concepts that we reviewed today. So recognizing that there is a difference between dialogue and debate, and perhaps for many of you, that was the first time of thinking about dialogue or conversations in that way, or really thinking if any of the definitions in regards to racial equity or racism resonated with you, or was the first time of thinking about these things in a different way. I think that would be also great points of conversation if people want to offer those.
I was going to share too that the slide deck will be a part of our video archive. So you'll get those printables and everything else that was used as a resource. I always think that those printables are they really resonate more when they're read aloud. So I'm glad that we did that exercise today. So I hope that that helps you in your work as well.
I mentioned, can you hear me? I'm not sure. Okay. That dialogue versus debate was very valuable to me. I never thought of it that way. It makes a lot of sense. And it turns out, I wrote in the chat that I'm definitely a debater and my husband wants dialogue. And it is a source of some head-on sort of situations. We have a great marriage where, you know, it's very good, but I realize that dialogue seems to be, debate is for debate. It's to get a point across, you know, politics, whatever. But it's, for me, thinking about it now, I should really work hard to switch to dialogue for my own sake, you know, in my marriage and my counseling or peer support with clients. So thank you.
So I think as a next step, there is a few things. I think as we explained before, and let me just go back to the screen here for a moment. We understand with all that we covered today, and you know, through the, as Janan asked about the intellectual concepts, different tools. The idea here is to provide lots of different components to this ongoing process wherever you are. The fact that you're here shows that you are definitely committed to this work. And I think Ingrid is the one that said when we're going over the you know, guidelines, is this is for all of us, because I think it's important that we all feel the journey is together. So that's why we have the way we do this collaborative, and really the umbrella initiative is better together, because we know we need to do this when we are all working together. So we have the team, and we will do the diversity talk next, and we hope that you can join us to continue, in which way we will also not only practice again, but perhaps show a different way to carry on these conversations. And we'll love if you want to try one in the meantime, as you come back and tell us how that went, because I think we know doing this kind of work as a smaller group as we did today is really important. So let me just see. So are we saying that then we should do, we wanted to just do one more piece of a video that's going to be part of actually the next series of conversation as well. So is that what we want to do? Or let me just check in with our co-presenters here. And do I need to share the sound for the video? Ingrid and Janan and Dietra, yes?
I think we were actually going to use this as something that you could do on your own and make plans to come back to our March 2nd event to talk a little bit more about how this felt when in your world, in your experiences of kind of taking this test. And yes, I'm going to add links to sign up for future trainings to the chat as well.
Okay. Perfect. Oops. Oh, boo, 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 boo. Oh, hold on. I was putting the video. So just look at this. I think what we are doing then is we're starting to work around this concept. And for today's conversation, what we were really trying to get about is the concept underneath of the cultural humility and how we can all add it to this conversation. So we, if you haven't, if this was your first time, I know some of you was the first time, please check out the recordings. We started this process back in December, where we shared the mental health of New England, the state, because we are the New England Mental Health TTC. Then we talk about the impact of implicit bias, which is extremely important part of this conversation and this journey. Today, we want to start personalizing a little bit. What is it that you can do? And it sounds like both Janan and you guys talk about self-care too within the process. And then for the next sessions, then we're going to really start understanding, because all of you want to get more information, more tool, really the kind of the impact of organizational biases, at least in my group. And I think for what I can gather, everybody's here. They have additional groups, whether they are working in the city and rural communities, which they want to incorporate learnings and tools to their teams. They want to take it back. And we're going to then start getting more into the transformational leadership to make a culture and how we do allyship. So if you look at this, these are things, and we will continue for this and for the next year, understanding and integrating this hands-on into your daily work. So I think if there are any final thoughts or questions from either the group or the presenters, otherwise we have been absolutely delighted to have meeting you in this space. We feel honored you share all the comments you did. It has been definitely a very inspiring conversation for me and working with all my colleagues. We have an amazing team in New England Mental Health TTC from my colleagues at Yale, Janan, Ingrid, and Vanessa, who is in the back, but makes this work seemingly wonderful. Every activity we do, we need to collect information. So we really, in terms of an evaluation, as a requirement of our funder, SAMHSA. So here is a code that you can scan directly either from your phone. I think it's also going to be on the chat, but you're also going to receive it. So we really, really appreciate if you can complete this once you receive the information and the follow-up for registration. Dr. Dietra, we cannot be, we are grateful. I don't know if you are in a position to say goodbye to the team. But it has been an honor to working with you and do this work. We know each other in many capacities, and she is probably wrap up at the moment because she's not, but maybe I'm sure we will see her again when we do our diversity talk. So any final words from our colleagues, Janan and Ingrid?
I just also want to say thank you for everyone, to everyone for joining us this afternoon. I also encourage and invite folks to attend our diversity talk, which will be next week. And we can engage in deeper conversations in regard to the concepts. And we can also hear about, Oops, sorry about that. We can also hear about any efforts you have in your organizations and or groups in your efforts to engage in equity conversations. So we can also use that time to do all of the above. And so we invite you to do your privilege check, home assignments. We won't call it homework, but home assignments before our diversity talk. And you can think of some ways that that might be relevant to your work or your lives.
Ingrid, any final words from you?
Oh, no, but thank you for joining us. And I am looking forward to seeing all of you on March 2nd, which is our next opportunity with Dr. Dietra. And we have those links in the chat.
Well, have a lovely afternoon, wherever you are. For some of you, you're just finishing your morning. So it's been an honor to meet you, and we'll hope to see you all next week. And thank you for attending.